It's a frosty spring morning here, but we are warm and cozy inside. Hi folks, Ariel over here. Today doing the first cooking video in our temporary kitchen in the shop. What I am making today is yogurt. This I've been making for the past 4 months or so now. It's a very, very thick yogurt, which is my preference. You can see how it holds up on a spoon. Fork in this case. You can see how thick it is, not runny at all. And there are many, many kinds of yogurt. This in particular is made with a strain that I probably am mispronouncing. It's called something like Reuteri, which I may well be mispronouncing. The L would be lactobacillus. The lactobacillus bacterias are ones that are generally useful to people for lots of things. Most yogurts have various strains of lactobacillus. This one in particular, the reason I'm making it, I'll talk about in a minute. When I first started it, I did buy some culture of just this. It came in a little packet. It's just a dry powder, and I don't want to open that one. I've been keeping these in the fridge or the freezer in case I need to restart it, but I only did that the first time. What I've been doing since then is using some of my already existing yogurt. So I just took 2 spoonfuls worth, I don't measure this precisely, out of this little container. These little jars are really handy. They're kind of like a nice single serving, and so that's useful. But anyway, so I'm making it now, and I'm on my, oh boy, I've been making like 3 batches a week for 4.5 months, so however many that adds up to batches, just using some of the previous batch to make the next one. Now I only have so many of these little jars, so in this batch, though I could do 8 of these at once, which is what I do most of the time, I'm doing 4 of them and then 1 bigger container because I'd run out of my bigger container, and this doesn't matter. You can put yogurt in any size and shape of container, but I usually don't use one of my little jars as my starter because I usually make 1 bigger container and then I use that for several weeks as my starter while we eat from the little jars. So I'm making a new big starter container today. But either way, whatever container I got it out of, I have a couple spoonfuls of yogurt here, which has my existing culture. And then I am going to add some kind of soluble fiber. This is the brand I've been using for the last little bit. I had some different one before that that I found first. Nobody seems to carry it in any of our local stores, so I did have to order it online. If I remember, I'll give you a link down below. I don't know if this one's better than all the rest or anything, but I've been using it. It works just fine. It is, people take it as a dietary supplement. It's just a fine white powder. Looks kind of like flour or baking soda, something like that. And this is to give, a lot of bacteria like to eat starch. I'm putting 2 tablespoons of that in there. This is to give the bacteria extra food for themselves. So I'm just going to mix that into my little bit of yogurt starter there to be sure that this, that the chunks of fiber don't get lumpy, and that's why I use a little fork for this. Just try to get that mixed till it looks creamy, and then to be sure it's mixed, I add a little bit of my milk. Now I decided to do a video on this because just do a splash in there and continue to mix this to be sure I don't have fiber lumps. This you actually need to use a pasteurized milk for. Most good yogurts are, and many good things are made out of raw milk, which has lots of great bacteria in it, and that's a wonderful thing. This particular strain of bacteria, and the reason I've been making it, is it's one that apparently is supposed to colonize more of your upper GI tract, so of all your guts that go back and forth like this inside. This is one that would naturally live in kind of the bottom of your stomach and the upper part of that tract versus the lower part that goes towards your bowels and getting rid of excess waste in the bowel movement area. And it's one that's a little weaker than some, and so in a lot of modern culture and life with all the things people do these days, it has been largely wiped out. I started this actually because Clay was having some skin breakout issues, and I was hopeful that it might, helping his digestion improve might help that, because in my experience with lots of skin issues in my life, they're usually coming from something inside, and sure, you can put a topical cream on, that might provide some relief, but to actually fix it, you need to do something inside. I've also found a lot of other benefits with this, but this probably a lot of you have access to pasteurized milk, and what I've been using that we can get at our one local store is 100% grass-fed, called grass milk. There's probably more than one brand, and organic. And this is not just pure milk either. This is actually half and half. You can use pure milk. It will give you a little bit more of a thinner yogurt texture, which is fine. You may prefer that. I like the really, really thick texture, and this gives you a really, really thick texture. You could use pure milk, you could use some cream and some milk, etc. But what I'm doing here that created that texture is half and half. So now that I've got my little starter bugs from my last batch of yogurt and my fiber to give them some extra start in life, and because this milk is pasteurized, which just means it's heated up, which killed all the bacteria. Normally I highly recommend raw milk, and I will probably do a video at some point doing yogurt with raw milk because we can have access to that from a neighboring farm, which is wonderful. But a lot of you may not have access to that. So this is something you can do with pasteurized milk, which is giving these bacteria specifically no competition, basically, from others that are a little more powerful. And I've got a little bit of my thick yogurt left in the bottom there, so I just use a little more of my milk here to wash it out. But all I'm doing is separating that kind of evenly between my different containers here. Like I said, most of the time I'm just doing 8 little cups. You can do it in big containers. One of the reasons I'm specifically using these little cups is I got this handy yogurt maker here that fits them, or it fits 2 of these, so it works very well. These are just regular, I think the company sells them, but I already had a bunch of quart-sized, I think it was leftover containers, just glass Pyrex containers. So I divvy this up kind of evenly between everything I'm doing here, and then I'm going to just fill up the rest with my plain milk, and I have my starter in all there, and it will grow and reproduce and do its own little bug things. So why you might want to eat any kind of yogurt, or this one in particular, is we need lots of good bacteria in our guts. And I'm not a doctor, but I have personally found that doing things like this has helped improve my digestion and therefore overall health, because that's something I've struggled with to some degree my whole life. And if you read what other people say about this, which technically apparently in the US is not allowed to be called yogurt if you're selling it, which I'm not. There's a regulation on exactly which strains of bacteria can be called yogurt, and this isn't one of them, though it is in, if you make a natural yogurt from whole raw milk, there will be a little bit of this in it. I'm just trying to create a higher concentration of it, and mostly this. But anyway, this is a fermented dairy product, and even though I don't feel well eating dairy most of the time, I seem to be fine with this. So now I'm going to put, these are just little plastic lids that just sit on top of here, keep anything from getting inside my little containers, and I'm going to put them into this yogurt maker. Just so the camera can see better, I'm going to bring over here for a second. This is helpful because different strains of yogurt ferment for different lengths of time. This one in particular seems to reproduce the most and have the most benefit when it's fermented for 36 hours. Now, a lot of strains are more like 8 hours, 12 hours, things like that. My sister makes yogurt without any fancy little yogurt maker like this she's doing a different strain with their raw milk because they have their own goats, with just using a little cooler like you'd pack a picnic lunch in, and pouring some hot water in there and putting her yogurt in and closing the lid, and by the next morning it's done, and that insulation on the cooler held the heat. So it's certainly not necessary to have this, but where I knew I wanted to do a lot of this particular strain and it needs a really long ferment time, I thought trying to manage the temperature at fairly precisely 100 degrees, which is, you know, if you think out what your body temperature is, that's only a couple degrees over that, but it is warmer than room temperature. If you get it, like most bacteria, if you get it too hot for its comfort temperature, it will die. If you get it too cold, it will die. So I want to keep it kind of right there, and this really seemed like for that length of hours the easiest way to do it, and it has been very easy. When I plug it in here, I flop this little piece of paper over it because the little light on this screen that tells you how many hours are left is super bright. It will light up the whole room, which I find very annoying. So I just keep that flat bit of paper there to dim it down. But it's pretty easy here. I'll show you in a minute how to set the temperature, because this yogurt maker could do various things, but set the temperature for the 100 degrees we want and the time of 36 hours. And that's all there is to it. It took me longer to explain this than to do this. Just going to set it back here on the counter, plug it in, and start it. But why am I making this? I described it first. I was hoping to help some clay skin issues, which do seem to have at least partially cleared up. But I've also found it really beneficial. If you read what other people describe about kind of being able to repopulate this strain in your gut, which when you eat something with not all of it lives and sets up house in your gut from my understanding, but some amount does. And so if you eat it repeatedly, like we've been doing for months, eventually you can hopefully reestablish a population there, because if you've ever taken an antibiotic in your life, probably this, along with most other good bacteria, got wiped out, etc. So the other benefits I've heard are a lot of people have increased energy, less tiredness and soreness after physical exercise, whether it's just your chores you're doing or working out. A lot of people tend to see increased hair growth, improved skin look. My skin isn't that spectacular anyway, but I am getting older and I have a little bit of a wrinkle here in my forehead that was starting, and I do think it's actually faded just a little bit. So this may be improving that. All the improvements in general, a lot of people say they sleep better, that it often helped their mental balance if you struggled with being depressed or sad or anxious. Not that it can fix all that, but it does seem to help your body kind of mellow some of those things out, at least for some people. And all that makes sense to me if those things are all fixed by having improved digestion of actual nutrients you're eating, which is hopefully what these bugs are doing when we eat them. So that is why I'm doing it. It seems helpful, and it's really, really tasty. I really, really enjoy this. I like the thick texture. We often eat it with either a little fruit or maple syrup on top. Yogurt's a little kind of creamy tart otherwise, which is a flavor I don't mind, but I like a little something sweet or fruity with it. And so we've been usually having a cup of these, you know, each day, except for the days we forget, for a while now. And I do make a bunch of batches a week because I've also been making some for my one brother who lives close to us. And for those of you guys who have been asking about him, maybe this spring I'll get to do a tour over at his cabin again and show you what he's got going on, but he's doing well. And we do see each other usually at least once or a few times a week. And I've just been making him batches of yogurt too because he's busy at work, and it's, as you can see, just a few minutes to throw another batch in for the week, and so that's pretty easy for me to do. So we're going to plug this in and turn it on. Okay, so you can see this screen. When you first plug it in, there's just a line of dashes. The owner's manual that comes with this is not excessively clear on this, I feel like. But if you press start and then you hit temp time, it's automatically set at 108 degrees, which is what a lot of yogurt varieties take. I'm going to turn it down to 100. Then I'm going to hit start on that, and now it's gone right to the time, which is automatically set at 8 hours, which is also standard for a lot of kinds of yogurt. And I'm going to dial this right on up to 36 and hit start. And now it's set. Like I said, that little LED light is annoyingly bright to me, but I think the camera can see it well. So I just let my little paper block hang down over it. And I hear you can run this either wet or dry. I do have a teeny bit of water in the bottom there. I think it helps it maintain the temperature, especially with our really dry air and the fact that our temperatures fluctuate a lot in here because we have a wood stove. But I have like 1/8 of an inch of water in there. And I just put that lid on, and in 36 hours, this should be ready to eat. One thing I will mention real quick is if you're fermenting something for 36 hours, which is basically a day and a half, it's really helpful if you either start it in the morning or the evening, because if you start it at, say, noon, it's going to be done at midnight one day, or if you start at 3 in the afternoon, it'll be done at 3 in the morning. So it's helpful if you can, whatever your schedule is, you just might want to think about that. It's not going to hurt the yogurt any, it just might inconvenience you. Because when that's done, I take them out of there, put them in the fridge. They're a little bit less stiff when the yogurt's still warm. That's normal for any kind of yogurt. And as soon as it cools, you get this texture that I showed you. And it's really enjoyable. I think if you try it, you will enjoy it. If you like fermented dairy products at all. You can also do the same setup with other strains of yogurt. And like I said, if you don't want to get a little yogurt maker, there are many other ways to keep the temperature warm depending on what your oven setup is. Some people can just put it in their oven with the light on. You want to test what that temperature is. For me, the easiest way to keep it at a really consistent temperature was to use this, especially if I'm running 3 batches a week. They take a day and a half each. That's, 4.5 days out of the week. I'm trying to maintain a pretty consistent 100-degree temperature. That's a long time to maintain something that precise, especially where our house is not just 100-degree room temperature. And like I said, it fluctuates, so we let it cool down overnight. We like to sleep cool. We warm it up during the day. Now as spring comes, we're not running the fire all day. So anyway, our house temperature fluctuates a good bit, which is fine, but a little tough on some things that ferment. But that's all there is to it. You can make similar kinds of yogurt. And like I said, after a while, I'll probably do one, a different strain, just using whole raw milk. But I know that can be difficult for a lot of people to access in a lot of areas, unfortunately. So this is one you can make with pasteurized milk. And the other thing I will say is the very first batch I did, when I used that little starter packet of culture, it did not come out looking like this. And I had read that it might not. It didn't look at all like this. What it looked like, and I should have taken a picture, I was so depressed with how bad it looked, I didn't. It looked like a crinkly, like very open-hold Swiss cheese-like curd on the top, and just pure liquid whey that was like as liquid as pure milk below that. That was not a, you could have eaten it, I'm sure, but it was not a pleasant texture or anything like that, because the top was kind of grainy, the rest was just watery. But what I had read is, even if that happens on your first batch, because it's so strong when you're starting it with that starter, which maybe means you actually need to use a little less starter, but I used the amount they sent in one little packet, which is what I was told to do, and it seemed excessively strong. But I took a little bit of the whey from that and mixed it into milk again as my starter for the next batch. The next batch came out perfect, and everyone since then has come out perfect. So if you're going to start that, be aware of this. I've heard some people have that happen, some don't. I don't know if it's affected by temperature, elevation, other things like that. But the first batch was not pleasant looking or anything like this. But every batch since has come out exactly like this. So maybe that inspires you to try something new and learn more about the fascinating world of millions or billions or trillions of little microbes that happily live alongside humans on our skin and inside our guts, and have been fermenting and preserving foods for us for many, many centuries through things like making cheeses and yogurts and sauerkrauts and kimchis and all the many, many fermented foods that people have eaten for a long, long time. Anyway, I find that a fascinating topic, and hopefully that's an interesting little how-to for you. It took me 3 times as long to explain it as it normally takes me to just mix my couple scoops of yogurt into the new milk and pop it in there and hit go. Thanks for spending your valuable time with us.
I hope you learned something interesting and useful.
Or found something beautiful here.